Part 9. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 81. Xiu was about to get up and leave, but the leisurely Daramu suddenly spoke. Wait a moment. Any further advice? As you said, this is indeed a very rare case with high research value. Although I can't help you solve this problem, we can change the method and save your life. Damu. The doctor put down the teacup and sat upright on the sofa. What? For example, if you give Casey to me, as for the money, that's easy to say. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. Chiu's expression was calm as usual. After speaking, he stood up and nodded slightly towards Daramu. Ha, is this necessary? Daramu didn't show any signs of anxiety when he saw this. Instead, he smiled and said, Baoba may not have made it clear because he was afraid of scaring you, and you don't know the dangers of superpowers. Let me tell you clearly, in your current situation, you will definitely not live long. You might as well give Kathy to me in exchange for some money, and you can live for 2 more years. Thank you for your concern, this is my business. Xiu refused in an unusually calm manner, without any fear at all. It seemed that what Daramu said was normal. Are you sure? Daramu still had that casual smile. Xiu didn't mean to talk nonsense and walked directly outside. You've seen what you need to see, so why stay here if you don't leave? Daramu looked at Xiu's back, the smile on his face became brighter and brighter. He waited until Xiu just stepped out of the living room before he said, I still need an assistant here, are you interested? Ziyuan paused as he stepped out, hesitated for 2 seconds before slowly taking back his steps, turned around and asked, what assistant? See for yourself. Daramu took out a piece of paper from nowhere and handed it to him. Xiu frowned and walked over to take it, briefly glancing at it. This thing is a handwritten recruitment notice. The position is assistant, and the responsibility is to take care of the elves in the backyard. This seemed a bit strange to Xiu, so he held up the announcement and tried. No need for an interview. He had no idea what Drak was up to and could only hope to get some information during the conversation. Didn't you have an interview just now? Daramu smiled and took a sip from the water glass, and continued, although it is very reluctant, but who said the research institute is short of people, I can only use you first. Xiu felt that Daramu was playing tricks on him. Where is a research institute? Will there be a shortage of people? This is impossible. I don't know how many people want to have a relationship with him. As long as he spreads the word, more people will come to apply for jobs, which is much better than him who is not even half-assed. As for those just now, were they interviews? Is this Dro's temptation? But this doesn't solve the problem at all. Then what about Casey's problem? Since Xiu is like this, he doesn't plan to continue testing. He just talks about it directly, so that he can know what his purpose is. But Dro's next words completely disrupted Xiu's train of thought. What Casey? That's your own business, what's none of my business? Seeing Xiu's expression, Daramu smiled and added. Food and lodging are included, and there is no salary. If you agree, just agree. If you don't agree, I can't help it. Why did Xiu feel that Daramu was a bit unreliable? He didn't even bother to make a big deal and went straight to showdown with him, and he wasn't afraid of Xiu's rejection at all. To be honest, what Daramu did was so sudden that he didn't have any time to react. Xiu couldn't figure out why Daramu did this. Did he really lack an assistant? It's not necessary to cultivate and see, but why should you leave yourself behind? Was it because he couldn't get Casey that he left himself behind? Or was it just Daramu who was teasing him about what he just said? With Xiu's silence, the scene suddenly became quiet, but Daramu didn't act in a hurry at all, taking a small sip from the water glass. Okay, after thinking briefly for a moment, Xiu agreed. That's right, Daramu nodded, there is no other place that can compare with the research on abnormal elves right now. Dr. Oki's words explained Shiu's doubts, and he was really regarded as a research subject, so he was kept here. Let's do this. I'll take you to familiarize yourself with the institute first, so that you won't wander around. Dr. stood up and walked to the door, then opened the door and looked at him. Shiu agreed upon seeing this and started walking around on the first floor. There is a straight corridor as soon as you enter from the door. The first thing is that there is a shoe cabinet on the left side of the corridor, and the stairs to the second floor are right next to the shoe cabinet. Along the corridor are various rooms. Following Dro's introduction, Shiu roughly knew the function of these rooms. The living room is where Dr. usually lives and sometimes rests here. He had just visited the living room, which was where guests were received. There are also 2 utility rooms filled with strange equipment. Except for facilities such as the kitchen and bathroom, the remaining rooms on the first floor are all libraries. Dr. took him in and walked around. To be honest, Shiu was really shocked. Shiu often went to the library in his previous life, whether it was at school or at the provincial level. After coming here, he also went to Baoba's library. In my previous life, there were hundreds of times more books in those places than in the institute, but those places were libraries. And here? It's just a research institute, a one-person research institute. Have you read all these books, Doctor? Of course, why would you buy them if you don't want to read them? Dr. Oak looked as if it was a matter of course, and it was obvious that he was a little proud of this. Can I read it? Shiu looked at the books on the bookshelf and felt that knowledge was beckoning to him. Whatever how much you can read is up to you, as long as the work is done. Shiu nodded subconsciously, as long as you can read it. After a round of walking, Dr. Oak took Shiu back to the stairs. Okay, you know the general location of the first floor, now there are only the basement and the second floor. Shiu looked at the stairs and didn't say much. If Dr. Oak wanted to take him there, he would take him there, and if he didn't, it would be useless to say it. Sure enough, this is what Dr. Oak said next. The storage room is below, where some experimental subjects are stored, that is, the Pokeballs of the Pokemons I take care of. As for the top, he looked up, then pointed and said, the top is my laboratory. I usually study Pokemons on the second floor. These 2 places are places you can't touch during work, so I won't take you there. You will see them naturally when you have the chance in the future. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 82. Shiu agreed casually. Of course, such an important place as the research area has no connection with him, a person he just met. Some of the research results inside are estimated to be worth thousands of gold, but Shiu didn't pay too much attention to it. A person must be self-aware. Next, I'll take you to where you live. Dr. opened the door and walked out. Only then did Shiu realize that he had been wandering around for so long and didn't even know where he lived. But where would he be if he wasn't in the institute? Shiu followed Dr. looking at the road ahead, and a bad premonition arose in his heart. Because the road he led was not towards the town, but towards the back mountain. Even if Shiu doesn't know where exactly Dr's family is, it's definitely not in the back mountain. Where are we going? Shiu asked, taking 2 quick steps. Go to the warehouse, you will live there from now on. Dr. pointed to the warehouse not far away and said with a smile. A wry smile flashed across Shiu's face, but disappeared in an instant, and he quickly followed. Warehouses were warehouses, and he had lived in worse places. What's more, the environment here is not bad. Although the gap was a bit bigger than expected, Shiu quickly adjusted. He had gone into the warehouse just now, and to be honest, the environment was really nice. There were boxes of rations and various materials placed inside. The location was quite empty, and there was nothing strange except for a faint smell similar to medicinal materials. It's just that there are no beds inside. That's the trouble. Now, you will live here from now on. Daramu pushed open the door of the warehouse and threw the key to him. Shiu took the key and didn't think much about what Daramu said again. Don't be afraid if there is movement at night. Huh? Are there any ghost-type elves here? Shiu is not afraid of things like ghosts. The unknown is scary. When he found out they were elves, Shiu even wanted to play with them. No. Why would I have that kind of thing here? Daramu shook his head casually. I'm talking about some elves coming to eat at night. Just don't be scared. Clear. Okay, you clean up first. I will come over later to take you to familiarize yourself with the elves here. We will officially go to work tomorrow. Yes. After Daramu left, Shiu looked at the huge warehouse with great pride in his heart. He originally wanted to shout, but in the end it turned into a sigh. Alas. Thinking of what happened to Kathy, Shiu felt as if a big stone was weighing down his heart. He is not yet completely sure of Droe's purpose in leaving him behind. Forget it. At least we have a place to stay now. Let's live in the present. Shiu was not swayed by his emotions. He quickly adjusted and released the elves casually. Casey, Flying Mantis, and Little Lucky Egg appeared one after another. We will be living here temporarily starting from today. Let's get used to it. Shiu waved to the elves and walked in first. Beep, beep, beep. After a busy tone, the screen began to flicker, and bits and pieces of pictures began to appear on the screen, but before the picture stabilized, a sound came out. How's it going? People are coming to your place. You're in such a hurry, why don't I have a chat with you? Dromu's voice sounded next, but his tone was a little subtle. If Shiu was present, he would definitely be able to hear whose voice it was. Isn't it Baobaba's voice? The originally intermittent scene suddenly stabilized. Judging from the background, it should be an office in the park. I saw Baoba sitting on the boss's chair. You and I have nothing to talk about. You are the famous Dro, and I am just a businessman. Daramu didn't pay attention to Baoba's words at all, but continued the topic just now. The person has arrived, but he is in a lot of troubles. And I asked you why you are such a good person and introduced me to a good assistant. Isn't that something you dare not accept? Baoba on the other side of the screen heard Daramu's teasing and said half-jokingly, bullshit, if I can stay, he will still take your turn. Who told you that Daramu has such a great reputation? He insists on finding you. I can't keep it even if I want to. I only took him in because of your face. If not. Daramu smiled after hearing this. He was about to defend something, but Baoba was faster. How many years have we known each other? Isn't it interesting what you are saying? You are looking at my face. My face is worthless in front of you. It is no more than the paper you throw away casually. Haha. You are still like this. Daramu laughed twice, but immediately became serious and said, to be honest, are you so sure that I will accept him? What do you think? Baobaba on the other side of the screen narrowed his eyes slightly. I don't think you will let go of such a rare research object. After seeing that Casey, and I checked the park's records, that one the Flying Mantis is also problematic. Ha ha ha. You still understand me? Baobaba ignored Dro, who was laughing on the other side of the screen, but said to himself, be careful, that Casey is very dangerous. I know, so I threw him in the warehouse. Daramu said casually without paying attention at all. By the way, do you know? A while ago, a Haxorus came to the park. Shiu had a chance to capture it, but he gave up directly without even hesitating. I find it incredible that he was so decisive. Oh. There are actually people like this. Dro was a little surprised. He knew that Baobab would not lie, but this showed that this was true. The kid outside actually rejected a Haxorus. If you knew his reason, you would find it even more incredible. That's why people are different. You are still like this. Dr. Oak did not refute, nor did he ask Xiu what his reason was. He just had a meaningful smile on his face. Don't talk about this. No one could convince each other in the dispute of ideas back then. Now you can forget about it. Baobab saw what he meant, but he didn't want to debate. Instead, he cut off the topic first. That's right. Dr. Oak was silent for a moment before smiling and saying, you could have chosen to join the alliance, but you refused and went back to open a wilderness area, haha, otherwise the whole level, no, the whole world. You know, I don't care about these. Baobab suddenly interrupted Dr. Oak. I climbed up from the bottom, without the class baggage of your wealthy families. I only do what I think is right. Dr. Oak seemed to remember something and sighed, this is why I admire you so much, you did what I wanted to do but didn't dare to do. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 83. As Dr. Oki fell silent, both parties fell into memories, and the scene suddenly became deathly silent. It's time to prepare for the change of leadership again. Now these juniors are not abiding by the rules at all. I don't know what trouble will happen by then. Once we old guys are gone, I don't know who can keep an eye on them. Baobab leaned back and leaned his whole back on the chair. His face was expressionless. No one knew what he was thinking. Dr. Omu pondered what Baobab said and asked, so you want to train a successor? What kind of successor? You just have to pay attention when you see good seeds. Baobab glanced at Dr. Omu disdainfully, not agreeing with his words. Dr. Omu didn't care about Baobab's attitude. Instead, he smiled and said, yes, I also want this world to be more stable. It seems that I have to prepare for it. Hearing these words, Baobab, who had been careless at first, suddenly laughed and joked. How many years have you been doing this? Who cares about you? That's better than having your nest ripped apart. The smile on Baobab's face suddenly collapsed. Ha ha ha, Dr. Omu laughed as if he was very happy after seeing Baobab deflated. After a while, he gradually calmed down and asked, but the condition of that Casey is so serious, didn't you tell me him? I didn't say it specifically, but I also hinted at it. He knows the situation better than anyone else. That's no wonder. The two chatted about the topic of repair for a while, and then changed to academic research, with Casey as the center. Fierce arguments could be heard from time to time in the research area on the second floor, but they would always end with a series of laughter. A long time. The screen had long been turned off, but Dr. Oki was still sitting in the chair. The hand on the armrest curled up his fingers, tapping on it from time to make a dull sound. Baobab, who had not been in contact for a while, suddenly contacted him and said that a person was going to be sent to him to study. His first reaction at that time was that it was impossible. Even though there has been no contact for so long, based on his understanding of Baobab, it is almost impossible to send people to him. After all, his ideas conflict with his. Only after seeing Xiu's situation did he realize that he was forced to come to him because he was helpless. After all, apart from the family in Golden City, he was the only one who knew about superpowers. Even this matter was not in his eyes. In comparison, the significance of Baobab contacting him was more important. It was originally thought to be a trivial matter, but judging from the information just revealed, the matter was somewhat serious. The alliance is about to change. Those people have gone too far, and it's time to give them a beating. Dr. Omu muttered to himself, and the small movements of his hands stopped. Omu Research Institute. Backyard warehouse. Have you finished it? Dr. Omu pushed open the door of the warehouse and saw, the warehouse that had been sorted out. Xiu, on the other hand, was still tying up some loose ends. "Oh, the doctor is here, just a little bit away." Xiu quickly sped up when he saw Dromu arriving. Dromu walked in and looked around. At the same time, he raised his hand to press Xiaoxia twice and said, "There's no hurry, take your time." Xiu nodded in agreement, but he felt that Dromu had become easier to talk to. Illusion. Xiu returned to normal after just a short meal. Instead of speculating on the boss's psychology, it is better to do his own thing. Flattery may be wrong, but doing practical things will definitely not cause problems. Of course, if your boss deliberately troubles you, everything you do will be in vain. Thinking of this, Xiu continued his work. "Okay, you took care of it so quickly. It seems I saw you right." Dromu walked around the warehouse and came out looking very satisfied. Originally, he just asked Xiu to clear out a place to sleep at night, but he didn't expect that he had to tidy up the entire warehouse. How should I put it, although he would organize the warehouse when he was free, there would still be omissions, and he didn't have much time. Over the years, more and more things were placed inside, so many that he couldn't even remember them. Now it has been sorted, and the debris that was originally piled up has also been cleaned up and placed again. The entire warehouse suddenly became neat and orderly, and the places that were originally filled with debris became empty, and the space utilization rate of the entire warehouse skyrocketed. This young man is pretty good. He can draw inferences from one example. No wonder Baoba said he was smart. I just sorted it out. Xiu rarely showed humility. "Okay, there is an old bed in the utility room over at the research institute, you can just move it over later." Dromu didn't care about Xiu's answer. "As for where to put it in the warehouse, you can choose it yourself." Okay, Xiu was very happy when he heard this. He originally thought he would sleep in a tent, but he didn't expect Dromu to have some conscience. "Then go quickly. Why are you standing here?" Dromu did not take special care of Xiu because of Baoba's introduction. Obtaining Baoba's approval does not mean getting his own approval. This is not enough to impress him. Besides, Baoba's intention was not to let him eat and die here, but to gain something. As a meeting gift, Oki Yukinari had planned to train him well, otherwise how would he be able to live up to the trust of his old friend? Yes, Xiu had no idea what Professor Oak was planning. After hearing his words, he immediately packed up and ran towards the research institute. Casey flew out after him. As for those few, they were playing on the grass. It's not that they didn't want to help, but Xiu asked them to leave because they were in the way. After all, Scythe has no hands, and not all the little lucky eggs are Zyogons, who are born with great strength. Only Casey can cooperate with him to work well. A telepathy is like Xiu using his own telekinesis. If he didn't have Casey's ability, he wouldn't be able to organize the entire warehouse until the evening. After Xiu got everything ready, Professor Oak, who was helping Scythe measure basic data, temporarily put down his work and said, "Get ready, I'll take you in to meet those elves, and you'll be the one feeding them from tomorrow." Yes, Xiu had nothing to pack, so he took Casey with him and set off. Professor Oak walked into the warehouse, directing Xiu to take the rations one by one, and his speed of speaking became faster and faster without considering Xiu's speed. "3 of this, 3 of this." Fortunately, Xiu was not a fool, and called Casey for help. In an instant, the situation was reversed. As soon as Professor Oak pointed his hand, the things flew up before he could say anything. When he finished speaking, the things were already on the cart. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 84. "Yeah, good job." Dromu said nothing about Xiu using Casey's power, but praised him a few times. This time it was Xiu's turn to be confused. Is the doctor testing me? Before Xiu could think more about Dromu, he walked outside, not forgetting to say something when he reached the door. Still not leaving? How long will it take? Yes, Shiu pushed up the cart and rushed outside. While walking on the road, Daramu suddenly asked, "Do you remember the number just now?" "Remember?" Shiu nodded in response. To be honest, he didn't have time to remember those things in that situation, but just because he didn't remember it didn't mean that Casey didn't remember it. Photographic memory is a rare talent among humans, but Casey was born with photographic memory. This is the difference between humans and elves. "It's no use remembering it," Daramu said casually, not caring about Chiu's feelings at all. Perhaps knowing that Chiu wanted to ask why, Daramu explained himself. "The elves here are different from those in your hunting areas. What I pursue is the original ecology. The entire back mountain is my property, and they simulate life in the wild. Only the data obtained in this way can be real and effective. Then let's. These are prepared for the elves in the backyard." Daramu raised his finger to a few places. "Look, those are the places." Shiu Shun looked over and asked casually, "Then these little elves should have a certain amount of food every day, right? Why do you say it's useless?" "You are right. There is indeed a certain amount of how much these elves eat every day, but it is not what you remember." Daramu smiled. In his opinion, at least the monks would not be too stupid to ask this. If he doesn't even ask this, it means he is just like that. Shiu didn't even know that his simple question out of curiosity would have such an effect, but he also used this to find out Droe's bias. Let's give an example. Some bosses like their subordinates to be smart, know how to draw inferences from one example, and have their own understanding of what they say. But some people don't like the people below talking and thinking too much, so they just need to do what they say. I have encountered both types of people, but to be honest, the latter one is easier to deal with. You just need to do what the boss says, while the former one has to use your own brain to guess the boss's mind. Very unluckily, Shiu discovered that Dro was the former type. It's useless for you to remember those things. What you really need to remember is the condition of these elves. You need to learn how to formulate appropriate rations based on the elves' conditions today. Then what should we do? Don't worry, I will teach you this. Daramu looked back at him with a faint smile on his face. Shiu remained silent and just nodded to indicate that he understood. He found that things seemed to be out of control, and he could only follow Damu now. It just sounds like this job is not easy. Shiu felt like he had been tricked, but he still didn't have to choose. Let's go to the pool first and walk around from there, and that's almost it. Daramu stretched out his hand and drew a circle, almost encompassing the entire backyard. As for the rest of the back mountain, you don't need to go there. Get used to it. Yes, Shiu took a look and found that there weren't many elves in the entire backyard, and they were still within his tolerance. He is just a go-between in the park and has never been the main force. Let him go directly now. To be honest, he doesn't know if it is possible. It's just that men can't say no. Shiu quickly adjusted. This kind of thing is not something he can say, it still depends on whether he has the ability, and Shiu feels that his ability is not bad. The pool is not far from the warehouse, and it only took Shiu a few minutes to push the trolley to the edge of the pool. This pool has two gaps along the river, one in and one out. The upper gap introduces part of the river water into the pool, and the outlet is to keep the entire pool flowing, so as not to become a pool of stagnant water. There is a small depression on the other side of the pond away from the river, with tufts of grass growing on it, some distance apart from each other. Dro stood aside and did not speak, but looked at the elf in the pool. And Shiu didn't waste such a good opportunity and started to observe. Due to inapplicable reasons, a large part of water elves cannot move freely on the shore, and because of habitat reasons, such elves are quite rare in the inland. Of course you should take a good look now if you have the chance. Horned goldfish, gem starfish, agate jellyfish, giant tongue clam. There are giant claw crabs and mosquito-repellent tadpoles over there in the depression. These are common aquatic elves in the Kanto area, but although they are common, this is the first time Shiu has observed them so closely. How's it going? Are you disappointed? Daramu's research institute only has these little elves. Daramu on the side laughed when he saw his reaction. Shiu nodded and said, it's a bit surprising that there is no Magikarp. As the Magikarp who occupies most of Kanto's water system, he did not appear in the pool, which really surprised him. Ahem, Daramu's face almost stopped tightening, and he complained with a stiff face, who knows how to raise an elf like Carp King? After speaking, he waved his hand and ended the conversation directly. Stop talking and start working. Yes. Put these kinds here, don't mix them, keep them separately. Put it here on top, don't make it too high. Spread this out, don't put it in a pile. Shiu followed Daramu's instructions and did everything right. After walking around the backyard, the two people returned. How is it? Have you learned it? Almost, I probably know it. Shiu didn't dare to speak too fully. To be honest, what Daroki said just now was very powerful. It was almost the same as in the morning, except that this time Daroki was explaining it, and the specifications were a little stricter. He can handle all this. It's easy. Your job is to feed them 3 times a day. You don't have to worry about the ones in the back. Clear. Also, don't go into the back mountain if you have nothing to do. The elves inside are completely imitating life in the wild. If someone breaks in, they will probably attack you. Shiu, who was silent, suddenly asked, Doctor, I have a question. Daramu was not dissatisfied when he heard that Shiu had a problem, he was even a little happy. Is it because what you did is different from what I said? Yes, the doctor said that it is useless for me to remember those things, but... Don't worry, what you really want to learn hasn't started yet. You will know why I said that later. Yes, Shiu fell silent again, but his expression was not willing to be like this. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 85. Daramu seemed not to notice Shiu's changes, and left first after saying something. Clean up and come over to the institute. I'll help you conduct a comprehensive inspection to confirm the situation. Shiu knew that this was the beginning of business and quickly pushed the cart into the warehouse. Casey on the side seemed to have noticed Shiu's thoughts and flew over. It's okay, don't worry. Shiu smiled at Casey and then put it back into the elf ball. At this time, the smile on his face slowly disappeared, and his expression became a little solemn. With Dro's strength, he should be able to find a solution. Shiu closed the warehouse door and walked towards the research institute. The door was not closed, just slightly closed. Shiu stretched out his hand and pulled it open. After entering the door, Shiu shouted, Doctor, I'm here. I didn't know what Daramu was doing. It took several seconds for Shiu to hear the response. I know, come up. Shiu determined the source of the sound, and then walked up the stairs to the second floor with a slight anxiety. One is curiosity about the research area above, and the other is concern about my own situation. Although I am not afraid, the intertwining of the two emotions is still quite torturous. No matter how long the stairs are, there is still a moment when they are finished, let alone just going up to the second floor. As soon as you go up, you will see a variety of instruments and silver-white metallic walls. To be honest, even though Shiu had been prepared for it, he was still surprised by the huge difference between this style and the one downstairs. Obviously the home style downstairs is so strong, but upstairs it is like this. Shiu has worked in a laboratory in his previous life, but the two cannot be compared. If the laboratory Shiu worked in his previous life was of modern style, then this can no longer be explained clearly with the phrase modern style, it is completely future style. Anyway, his first impression on the second floor was quite hardcore. The space utilization rate of the entire second floor is quite high. It can be said that there are no other walls except the four load-bearing walls. What divides the space are large metal cabinets erected one by one, with different styles. Anyway, Xiu, through the glass window, could see bottles of medicine in the metal cabinets near the stairs, and some bottles had strange names written on them that Xiu couldn't recognize. Xiu lowered his head and glanced at the floor, which was made of the same material as the wall, before walking inside. After bypassing several boxes, Xiu finally had a full view of the research area. The first thing is a huge screen hanging on the wall, but it is now a black screen with nothing on it. Under the screen is a computer, and next to the computer are several machines that have no apparent function. You can see wires connecting them to the computer. In addition to various machines, there are also several bookcases placed on the second floor. However, these bookcases do not contain books, but folders. Presumably these are DROE's usual research records or results. Xiu's eyes didn't linger too much on it, because he found a sofa that was very different in style from here. It could be used as a bed, and there was a table in front of the sofa with some papers written on it. What's interesting is that the sofa faces the big window on the second floor. Although the sun has turned and cannot be seen now, the morning sunlight will definitely shine on the sofa. He guessed that it might be used for rest or something. After all, some research cannot be left and one must stay and watch. Hey! You came up and didn't come to help. Daramu's voice sounded. At this time, Xiaokai realized that it was not the time to visit yet, and quickly followed the voice to find Daramu among a pile of instruments. Come on, help me clear the surroundings. I want to use this instrument. Yes, Xiu looked at the 2-meter-high instrument in front of him and asked curiously, Doctor, what is this for? You'll know later, get to work now, Daramu said, and then walked towards the computer with a line in hand. Xiu, who didn't get an answer, looked back at the capsule-like instrument, and then started cleaning it. As things were cleared out, the entire device emerged in front of Xiu. There is a silver-white base below with 4 red legs extending out. Xiu guessed that these 4 legs were just for fixation and had no other use. There was a raised metal cover on top, and Xiu didn't see anything strange about it. There is a layer of transparent glass in the middle, and there are some wires connecting the upper and lower parts. There is also a whiteboard at the core that connects the upper and lower parts, with lines extending from both sides. It looks quite different, but I don't know what it is used for. Of course, to use a higher EQ term, it is black technology. But before he had time to think about it, Xiu was called to clean another instrument. It took more than half an hour to prepare. Xiu looked at the cleaned instruments and suddenly felt a little panicked. The technology in this world can be said to be very cyberpunk. Some technologies are far inferior to those on Earth, but some are extremely developed. These technologies that were born out of elves have their own unique charm. The unknown technologies in front of him were beyond Xiu's concept of mechanical equipment. As expected, anything related to elves was outrageous. What are you doing standing there? Come here and help me with the wiring. I still need to debug it. Yes, Xiu cleared his mind 2 or 3 times and walked towards Daramu. It would cost a lot to use these instruments, and there is probably no place that can provide such an examination except here. In order to get accurate results, Xiu can only do what Dro said and wait for the results. It was another round of preparation. Xiu didn't know how much time had passed. He was so busy that he was about to split his mind. How could he have the heart to think about this? Dro didn't show any signs of fatigue after such a long time. Instead, he looked more and more energetic. He rolled up the sleeves of his white coat, and his hands made a crackling sound when typing on the keyboard. In Xiu's opinion, Dro had the spirit of a keyboard warrior who said, "I have the world with my keyboard in my hand," and he looked as if he was several years younger. Are all the things ready? Xiu took another look at the complicated and messy lines underground, nodded and replied, Everything is done as you said. Let's start. Come on, stand on it. Dr. Oak opened the glass cover on the capsule-shaped instrument, and then looked at Xiu and said. Xiu knew there was no way out now, so he looked up at the instrument in front of him and walked straight over. Professor Oak at the side helped Xiu connect the wires that touched his body, and comforted him. Don't worry, all the instruments are safe and harmless, and I have used many of them myself. Xiu remained silent and turned his head to look at this small glass space. Ready? Tell me if there is anything unusual. Professor Oak closed the glass cover with his backhand and turned directly to the computer. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 86. Forget it, let's get started. Time is running out. Dr. Oak didn't mean to explain in detail, but walked to the computer and sat down, and started typing on the keyboard. After about 10 seconds, he said. Okay, next one. Xiu. What's going on? Is that it? Xiu looked down at the wires connected to his body. He was just worried that the instrument might have problems after being left for so long, so he asked such a question. After all, he went to the hospital to take an X-ray and there was movement. What are you daydreaming about? What? Are you still thinking about the instrument glowing? Or singing? Dr. Oak complained when he saw Xiu still standing there without any movement. That's not right. No matter what, there won't be no sound at all, right? There's not even a power indicator light. Nonsense. I made this thing myself, how can I not know more about it than you? Dr. Oak roared, hurry up. Yes, Xiu quickly unplugged the things on his body, then pulled it out of the instrument, followed the instructions to walk to the next instrument, and then installed it. It was just that Dr. Oak, who had entered the research state, was like a different person. His enthusiasm was really unbearable. As the inspection progressed, time was also passing. It was less than 10 minutes after all the inspections were completed. Was it really 2 hours of preparation and 5 minutes of completion? Okay, the basic inspection has been completed. As long as the data comes out, we can know your current specific situation. After completing the inspection, Dr. Oak also returned to his original appearance, sitting on the blue computer chair and looking at the various data on the screen. How long will this take? Xiu leaned over to look at the rapidly changing data on the screen. After looking at it for a while, he felt that his eyes were a little blurry and he didn't see anything. Do you understand these? At first, Dr. Oak saw that he was so engrossed in reading and thought he understood, but soon found that he was a fake. I don't understand. Xiu shook his head. I don't understand either. Dr. Oak saw Xiu like this and laughed, ha ha ha. This is a computer calculating and analyzing data. Only the computer can understand it, and even if you can understand it, you can't keep up with the speed of the computer. Oh. Okay, if you are hungry, go downstairs and get something to eat. I'll just watch here. Okay, what do you want to eat, doctor? Xiu didn't refuse. He was really busy all day and was very hungry now, and his own elf hadn't been fed yet. See what else is in the kitchen, just make do with it. Dr. Oak sat on the computer chair, staring at the screen, not knowing what he was thinking. Xiu went downstairs directly, but after just a round in the kitchen, he ran out helplessly. The only thing that can be eaten in the whole kitchen is instant noodles, and there is no seasoning. Can you imagine? Xiu felt like he was back in the university dormitory. Fortunately, he had prepared a lot of food when he was camping in the wild, which was more than enough for 1 or 2 meals. Originally, he thought that he might not be able to finish it with food and accommodation, but now it seems that he is still too young. Only a research geek like Professor Oak can buy groceries and cook. Forget it, it's good enough to be able to make instant noodles. It's better to be reliable. However, the situation in the kitchen is more serious than he thought. There are all kinds of pots, pans, and other things, but it's unknown how long they haven't been used. Only a small pot shows signs of being used. Because the soup residue of the instant noodles has not been poured out, some strange suspended objects float on it, and a pair of chopsticks are inserted diagonally into the soup. Oh trouble, Shiu sighed, and then released a few elves in the kitchen. He had to prepare food for the elves before he had time to take care of this place. You guys eat first, I have something else to do. After giving instructions, Shiu turned around to clean up the kitchen. Doctor, it's time to eat. Why so long? Does it take so long to cook? Professor Oak turned around and said directly while sitting on the computer chair. I wasted some time cleaning up, Shiu explained with a smile, but he complained in his heart, you mean to cook instant noodles so fast? Okay, it won't be a while anyway, let's eat first. Go downstairs to the kitchen. The traces of the elves' activities have disappeared, replaced by a table of food. Not much, 3 dishes and 1 soup. Why don't I remember having these ingredients here? Yes, these are what I bought on the road before, most of them are canned, maybe a little stale, there are no vegetables to buy at this time, don't dislike it, just make do with it. No, I haven't eaten rice for a while, Professor Oak said as he sat down, picked up the chopsticks and said, sit down, I don't have those rules here. Yes, when Shiu sat down, Professor Oak had already started eating, and it seemed that he had been hungry for a long time. Shiu found that Professor Oak ate very quickly, he had only eaten half of the first bowl, and Professor Oak was already on the second bowl. Don't think Shiu eats slowly. He used to work in a hurry, so his speed to eat enough is not comparable to that of ordinary people. And this journey did not slow him down. On the contrary, because of the surrounding environment, he ate not slowly at all. But even if he did, he was still far behind Professor Oak. So scary. After finishing the meal, Drum ran to make a cup of tea, then sat across from Shiu and said leisurely, the food was well done. You will be responsible for the future meals. Okay, no problem, Shiu agreed casually. He has to cook anyway, so one more person is fine, and he has to agree even if he doesn't want to, because he doesn't want to eat instant noodles, which he was tired of eating in his previous life. Some basic data have just come out. The impact on other parts of your body is basically not big. You are just a little thin at most, but the impact on your brain is huge. However, I am only making guesses based on those data. The real results will not be known until the computer analysis is completed. You should be mentally prepared first. When he said this, Shiu's mouth froze. After 2 seconds, he responded, and then continued chewing. Drum looked at his expression, and then added, your elf will also have to undergo an examination in the next 2 days. Will my staying here affect Dr. Shiu looked up at Dr. Omuo. Originally this question was quite serious, but Drum chuckled lightly and seemed very leisurely. I'm not saying that. Apart from those with superpowers, not many people in the world understand this better than me. I started researching superpowers 20 years ago. It's better to worry about yourself than worry about me. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 87. Okay, it's almost time, the report should be out. After that, Droe stood up and left with the teacup. Shiu picked up the bowls and chopsticks again and found that the food was already cold, but he didn't pay much attention to it. After eating a few bites, he quickly packed up everything and hurried up to the second floor. Is the doctor okay yet? Shiu walked towards Droe who was sitting in front of the computer. Drama glanced back and said, see for yourself. After saying that, he took a piece of paper from the side and handed it over. Shiu took it slightly uneasily, but the more he looked at it, the more solemn his face became. What is this? Xiu put down the report and looked at Dr. Oak. Literally Dr. turned back to look at the computer screen, tapped the keyboard with his fingers to retrieve the data, and then looked at them before explaining. Most of your physical problems are not serious, but your brain is greatly affected and is extremely active. It shows that your memory, thinking, etc. are stronger than ordinary people, but your brain also consumes more energy than ordinary people. At the same time, the high activity of the brain also means that your lifespan is shorter than ordinary people. Simply put, it is premature aging. Dr. paused for a moment, turned his computer chair to look at Xiu, and said in a serious tone, "From the data, if you maintain this state, you can live to about 50 years old, not to mention the changes that may occur if you continue to be in contact." Xiu didn't say anything, but the frown on his brows showed his mood. Although Xiu originally knew the danger, he didn't have a clear understanding of it. Now that he knows it, he has some emotional fluctuations. But he is not a child anymore, and he knows that he will be responsible if he takes it upon himself. Dr. watched Xiu adjust his mood in just a few dozen seconds, and he couldn't help but admire him in his heart. After all, not everyone can have such a mentality. "Are you going to check them next for Casey?" "Don't ask if it can be saved," Dr. asked in surprise. "If you don't know how to deal with Casey's problem, I can't solve my problem either," Xiu said his thoughts calmly. After hearing this, Dr. could only smile and nod. That's true. With the previous preparations, the next inspection of Casey and the others went extremely smoothly and was completed quickly, but there was still some time until the report came out. Analyzing the 3 copies together, it is estimated that the computer will not be able to complete it today, and the results will not be available until tomorrow. Dr. leaned back in his chair, and his whole body lost the energy he had at the beginning. No matter how energetic he is still an old man in his 50s or 60s. Repeating such work will indeed consume his energy. Xiu exited the second floor of the research institute and took the elf back to the warehouse. Xiu woke up early the next morning following his biological clock. He looked at the ironclad warehouse and was going over yesterday's slightly bizarre experience in his mind. "I came to Zhengzhen town, which is the starting point of the world, and also met the legendary Dr. Oak. It's just that there is a huge gap between reality and the impression in my mind." This gap gave him a strange sense of fragmentation. He felt like his previous life was beginning to disappear from his mind. He stood up and walked to the door and pushed it open. A dazzling sunlight instantly covered his body. The originally dark warehouse also glowed with a different kind of vitality because of this light. There is still some thin mist in the sky, and the sunlight penetrates the mist and shines on the grass. Most of the grass on the ground is covered with drops of dew, which shines brightly through the refraction of the sun. Some elves have also woken up early. "Come and play with your companions on the grass." Looking at the scene outside, Xiu felt that the anger accumulated in his heart gradually dissipated like the mist in the sky. "Today is another day full of hope," Xiu shouted after a long time, and then released the elves with his backhand. "Everyone, come out." Casey and the others came out of the elf ball and couldn't help but be stunned for a moment when they saw the strange environment in Zhengzhen town. "Come on, let's move around before we have breakfast. You still have to persevere in morning jogging. Once you give up, all your efforts will be wasted." The flying mantis stood up silently, the wings on its back spread out and flapped gently, as if it was moving its muscles. Seeing how energetic the flying praying mantis was, Xiu also slowly moved his hands and feet, preparing to fight with it. "Let's go," Xiu shouted to the flying mantis, and then ran around the backyard. But he didn't run far before he was easily overtaken by the flying mantis. Looking at the back of the flying mantis, Xiu shouted, "You're cheating, you can't use your wings." But his words had no effect at all, and the flying mantis ran faster. "Hey! Wait for me." Now only Kathy and little Lucky Egg were left. The little Lucky Egg's attention had long been attracted by a few elves playing on the grass. As soon as Shiu left, it walked over there, but its hands were naturally short and it looked very funny when walking. Casey also didn't miss any opportunity to exercise. It knew its own affairs, and the sooner it could control the power in its body, the better. After confirming that the little Lucky Egg was not in danger, he turned around and floated to a remote corner where the backyard and the forest met, and levitated his whole body in front of a tree. I don't know what strange ability Alakazam taught it. A few leaves slid down from its head and floated in front of it. Then the leaves began to move strangely, rotating around Casey. As time went by, the whole town of Pallet seemed to come alive. From the edge of the hillside, you could see the tiny figures walking in the town from afar. The thin smoke rising from the chimneys of some houses was full of life. Shiu ran slower and slower, and finally walked slowly. He raised his hand to check the time. It was already 6 o'clock, and it was time to work. If you want to run, keep running. I'm going to prepare breakfast. After saying something to Scyther, he turned around and ran towards the warehouse. But before he got there, he found that Professor Oak was walking towards the side. He didn't know what instructions he would have, so he simply ran towards the professor. "Doctor, what's up? I was just about to feed these elves. You're up so early. I thought you didn't get up yet because you went to bed so late last night." Dr. Oak didn't answer Shiu's words, but looked at him with a smile on his face. "It's almost the same as usual. I wake up at this time, and I still have work to do." Shiu didn't know what Dr. Oak meant, so he could only say a little. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 88. Don't worry about it now. It's okay to feed it later. Dr. waved his hand, indicating that there is no rush. Let's talk about the flying mantis first. Flying mantis, a trace of surprise flashed across Shiu's face. He turned to glance at the flying mantis that was moving not far away, and then turned back and asked, "What's wrong with it?" The director said that it shouldn't be affected much. That's right. And shouldn't the focus be on Casey? Is the report out? Dr. also looked at the flying mantis. When Shiu looked at himself, he came back to his senses. Without a word, he turned and walked towards the research institute. "Let's go over there and talk." Shiu followed closely. Casey, who was not far away, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the two of them. The surrounding leaves were scattered on the ground, but soon they floated up again and returned to their original appearance. And Casey's eyes had long been closed. "What's going on? Is it harmful?" Shiu couldn't help but ask after he was just a little far away. "It's not what you think. It's very troublesome to talk about. I'll explain it in detail later." Dro didn't know why he only spoke half of his words. Instead of slowing down Shiu's mood, it actually made it worse. It's just that Shiu didn't show it, but followed him honestly. "I would definitely say it, maybe the doctor has his own considerations." After entering the institute, he did not go up to the second floor. Dro took him to the living room. "As soon as I entered the repair shop, I noticed the two documents placed on the table. These should be Casey's and the others' inspection reports. Come here, let's talk." Shiu's attention was all on the two document bags. When he heard Dro's words, he just nodded mechanically and followed them. "Would you like tea or water?" "Hey," Shiu looked up and looked around and found that he had already sat down. "Let's drink tea." Seeing him like this, Dro thought he was not awake, so he walked out with a smile. Shiu looked at the document bag in front of him with some anxiety. "Hey." Dro pushed a cup of tea in front of Shiu, then sat opposite Shiu with his own cup in both hands, took a sip and said, "It turns out that drinking a cup of warm tea in the morning is the most comfortable." Shiu reached out and picked up the tea cup, but he didn't drink it, just smelled it. To be honest, he doesn't like drinking tea in the morning because he had some stomach problems in his previous life and drinking tea on an empty stomach would be a little uncomfortable. Although his body is full of energy now, he can't get rid of this habit for a while. You should take a look at this report from Flying Mantis first. Daramu picked up one of the reports on the table. Shiu picked it up eagerly and scanned it briefly. It's just that Shiu was confused by the content above. He only knew that the Flying Mantis was not greatly affected, but he didn't understand the subsequent ones and could only ask. What does this mean? You've been with it for so long, haven't you noticed how special this Flying Mantis is? Shiu frowned when he heard this, and returned his eyes to the report again, looking at the strange data on it, and after a few seconds he spoke. Is there any problem? There is nothing abnormal about the Flying Mantis. When Droe saw Shiu's reaction, he was sure that she didn't know anything about it, but he didn't mean to explain in a hurry. Instead, he asked. Do you know about the giant pincer mantis? I know, the evolved form of the Flying Mantis. Although he was a little surprised that Dromu would ask such a question, he was even more curious about how the matter of the Flying Mantis was related to the giant pincer mantis. Then do you know when the first giant pincer mantis appeared in the world? I don't know. Shiu shook his head, but he felt that the topic was a bit strange. I don't know either. Dromu shrugged and pushed his hands. But I know that there were giant clawed mantises in ancient times. Dromu opened one of the document bags and handed over a piece of information. Seeing this, Shiu quickly put down the teacup and took it. After looking at the content, Shiu was a little confused. He then looked up at Dromu. This is. Yes, in addition to studying the habits of elves, I also study the historical legends of elves. This is the ancient description of the appearance of the giant pincer mantis. Shiu looked at the information again. Most of these were pictures, and the contents inside were some ancient texts and murals. If you are not at this level of cultivation and cannot understand those ancient texts, you can only focus on those murals. It seems that these murals come from some ancient ruins. There has long been no color on them, leaving only some lines. However, it can still be seen that the Flying Mantis evolved into the giant pincer mantis, but Xiaoya was confused. The time when the first giant pincer praying mantis appeared cannot be determined, but we can find some clues through some ancient documents. Droki also saw that Shiu couldn't understand the information at all, so he explained on his own. Stand up. It is almost impossible for us to see wild giant pincer mantises in the wild because the evolution from flying mantis to giant pincer mantis requires some special circumstances, and it is almost impossible for wild flying mantises to encounter this material. Is it because the material is man-made? Shiu actually remembers that in the game, the flying mantis needs the material metal film to evolve into the giant pincer mantis. Just from the name, you know that this kind of thing cannot exist in the wild, it can only be man-made. That's right. Dro pointed to the mural on the picture and said, this is ancient evolutionary material. There are better ones now. Shiu briefly summarized Dro's words and said, so the world's first giant mantis was man-made. I thought so at first. After all, there is no record of this in ancient documents. We can only infer it based on the existing ones. This is also the basic understanding of the giant mantis in the industry. It is the recognized origin of the giant mantis. Originally, it was fine, but when he talked about this, Dro suddenly became excited. But now I don't think so. Our discovery will overturn this argument. Doctor, are you talking about the discovery on Scyther? Shiu immediately understood why Dro said so. For a researcher, every time he solved an unsolved mystery or overturned a wrong theory, it was a great success. No wonder Dro behaved like this. Please tell me in detail. Dr. Shiu knew that he couldn't understand these at his level, so he simply handed the things back. This is about the discovery on Scyther. Dro opened another file bag and took out a small stack of paper. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 89. This time it was in modern characters, but he couldn't understand the data on it. As if he knew what level Xiu was at, the doctor took it out and put it on the table casually, and continued. It's metal. I found some metal elements in the body of Scyther, and the content is 100 times higher than that of ordinary Scyther. Metal film. Xiu felt that he had caught the clue, and suddenly seemed to understand, and said, is the metal element the requirement for the evolution of Scyther? Tell this to Dr. Oak, who nodded after listening. This is indeed the key, but there is another problem involved. Wait a minute, Xiu interrupted Dr. Oak and asked, what about other Scythers? Xiu still had a question. According to this statement, the giant claw mantis was just evolved by Scyther absorbing metal, but what does this have to do with his Scyther? This is the core of the problem, and it is also the key to overturn the consensus I mentioned before. Dr. Oak picked up the photo again, pointed to the evolutionary material on the mural and said, affinity. Affinity for metal. That's right. Look at the material used by the ancient Scyther to evolve into the giant mantis. Dr. Oak pointed to a place on the photo and said, this is a metal powder. Look here again. Dr. Oak picked up another photo and pointed to the ancient text on it and said, this is the ratio of this material, of which iron powder accounts for 80%, and there are some other materials mixed. Is the mixed material because each Scyther has a different affinity for metals? That's about it. If you want to reach the standard of Scyther's evolution, you must let it absorb enough metal elements, but affinity is a very critical issue. Dr. Oak didn't know what he thought of, and suddenly sighed. Alas, in order to overcome this problem, ancient people developed this material that can stimulate the body of Scythe and forcefully absorb metal. But the disadvantages of this material are too obvious, with a success rate of less than 30%. In ancient times, failure means conflict, and this conflict is often accompanied by death. Xiu also understood what Dr. Oak said. In order to overcome this problem, ancient people must have done a lot of experiments, but the success rate of the finished product is only 30%. You can imagine the reason behind it? Dr. Oak was afraid of scaring Xiu, so he comforted him. Now many large companies have conducted research on that material, and the key technology has been mastered in the first stage. Even if the metal liquid produced is not successful, there will be no big problem. Xiu just nodded to the doctor, without much expression. Dr. Oak saw that he accepted the setting and didn't say anything more, but brought the topic back. Even with the help of this material, not all Scythers can evolve into giant mantises. As for the origin of this formula, it is also unknown, so there is a saying that giant mantises are artificial elves, and even that giant mantises can only be artificially created. There are no completely wild giant mantises in the wild. Doctor, that's not right. Xiu suddenly interrupted Dr. Oak and said seriously, the two methods of ancient evolution and modern evolution are very different and cannot be compared. Dr. Oak looked at Xiu unexpectedly. He did not show any dissatisfaction with him interrupting him, but looked at him with interest. You are right, the two are indeed different. How did you find out? It's obvious. Xiu took the picture on the table. The material on the mural is for internal use, and metal film is for external use. Dr. Oak did not pay much attention to Xiu's words, but took the photo in Xiu's hand and said with a smile, otherwise, why do you think it's not a big problem even if it fails? The times are progressing. Xiu pondered Dr. Oak's words and nodded after a while. In fact, the evolution of Scyther into giant mantis is to change its body by absorbing metal elements, but ordinary Scyther needs various materials to succeed, so there is such a saying. But is it really like this? Dr. Oak suddenly became excited, slapped his hand on the table, and said excitedly, "Our discovery today is likely to overturn this. Giant mantis may not be man-made, and it may also be born in the wild. Is it because of its special metal affinity? Yes. If there is a scyther in the wild with the same superior metal affinity as yours, it may not rely on human power, and absorb enough metal by contacting ore in the wild and finally evolve, thereby overturning everyone's current understanding of the origin of giant mantis. Doctor, do you want to study my scyther?" Xiu also heard the hidden meaning of Dro and carefully tested. "Yes, I want to explore whether there is such a possibility, and at the same time find out the reason for the evolution of scyther." Xiu did not speak, his eyes looked at the tea leaves floating in the teacup. "This won't do any harm to scyther. I will do my best to improve its strength." "Isn't that what you want?" Professor Oak started to bribe him when he saw that the conversation had started. "What is the doctor going to do?" Xiu did not agree immediately. Although the evolution of scyther was also within his consideration, it was not now. It was not even 1 year old. Was it a little anxious now? Continue to increase the metal content in its body, simulate the situation of scyther in the wild, and see if it can complete the evolution without using the metal film, Professor Oak said while observing Xiu's expression, trying to get some of his thoughts. But Xiu's face was tight, and he could not see any tendency except that he was a little anxious. Seeing this, Dr. Oak continued, "Your idea is completely wrong. The giant claw mantis is actually more like another growth direction of scyther. Maybe it originally existed, but it was only the large-scale interference of humans that led to the current state." Xiu agreed with this statement, because his scyther and the giant claw mantis have the same racial value, both 500, and the two are just biased in different directions. Scyther tends to be speed, while the giant claw mantis tends to be defense, and both have high physical attacks. So it is not a problem to determine that the giant claw mantis is another direction. And it doesn't mean that giant mantis is definitely stronger than scyther. That can't be said at all. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 90. There are many people who choose not to evolve. Even in the wild, the protective coloration on the flying mantis is more suitable for survival and will not be as conspicuous as the giant pincer mantis. This also confirms what Dr. Oki said before, that giant pincer mantises only appear in human society. You don't have to worry about the growth of flying mantis, nothing will happen to you with me here. It can be seen that Dr. Oak attaches great importance to flying mantis. Under normal circumstances, he would not speak like this. Seeing that Xiu still refused to let go, Dr. said directly, "How about it, you put forward the conditions, whether it is money, elves, materials, or whatever, as long as it is within a reasonable range, I can accept it." "Doctor, there is no need to say this. This matter is not something I can decide alone. I need some time to digest it." Xiu didn't care at all about the conditions put forward by Dr. These were not important to him. At most, he was the guardian. He still had to ask the flying mantis himself for his opinion on this. If it is willing to repair, there is nothing to say, but if it is not willing, then repair can only refuse Dr. Oak's request. However, refusing will definitely offend Dr. and as a result, he will probably run away again. Dr. looked at Xiu's tangled expression and didn't know what he was hesitating about. Not everyone has such a great opportunity. As long as he grasps it well, he can't say it will skyrocket, but it will definitely have great benefits. And Xiu is still thinking about how to explain this situation to Flying Mantis. Casey has already had an accident because of his problems before, and he doesn't want to happen again. "I can't decide this. Let's do this. I'll go back and talk to Flying Mantis and give the doctor an answer within today." In the end, Xiu still felt that he should talk to the Flying Mantis first to see what his attitude was. Dr. looked at him a little surprised, thinking he was thinking something, but he didn't expect that he ended up saying this. Okay, this matter really requires the cooperation of the flying praying mantis. Dr. picked up the teacup and took a sip before saying slowly. Xiu regained his composure for a moment, and then asked Dr. Put aside the matter of the flying mantis for now, what do you say about Casey's situation? Speaking of this, Dr. also looked a little serious. He leaned over and pulled out a report from the document bag and handed it over. The situation with Casey is similar to what you said before. His brain is extremely active and his development is faster than that of other Caseys. And my examination also found that Casey's brain structure is different from ordinary ones, which may be the reason for its control disorder. Is there any solution? This information was similar to what Baoba gave. He didn't feel much about it, but directly asked about the solution. Dr. frowned and pondered for a few seconds before speaking. I don't know about this problem, because this situation is not an injury. There is no treatment. It looks more like a mutation. Then according to the doctor's idea, is it possible for Casey to evolve into Yongjira to solve this problem? Have no idea. Dr.'s answer was so crisp and clear that Xiu didn't even react for a moment. You are Dr. How could you not know? Xiu looked a little impatient and shouted at Dr. The report he was holding had wrinkled at some point. He worked hard to come here from Qianhong City and met the famous Dr. But now he still has no solution or even direction. It's no wonder that the cultivator has such sentiments. I have said that this is an unprecedented mutation. I really don't know until I am absolutely sure. Dr. didn't pay attention, he still looked calm, and he didn't forget to add something. There are only two kinds of people who know everything, one is a god and the other is a liar. And I am just an ordinary scholar, how could I be so powerful? I'm sorry. Xiu knew very well that he had been a little excited just now, so he put down the report in his hand and apologized to Dr. We still need to study the problem of Casey. We can't start to think of solutions until the situation is completely determined. The flying mantis is a good opportunity. You, just figure it out. Then I'll go to work first. Xiu stood up and said to the doctor. Dr. waved his hand and said casually, okay, go quickly. After watching Xiu go out, Dr. raised the corners of his mouth slightly and murmured, Baoba is right. This kid is a very strange person. No wonder he would do such a thing. Xiu didn't know what Dr. said about him, and even if he did, he wouldn't have time to care. He was currently thinking about how to tell the flying mantis about it. I haven't decided whether to lie or to tell the truth. But if he told the truth, he was afraid that it would be like what happened to Casey last time, where he would run away from home after a disagreement. The last encounter really made him a little scared. What would he do if it happened again this time? Flying mantis is not as easy to talk to as Casey. Xiu thought as he walked, he didn't even know that he had walked through the warehouse. When he came back to his senses, he found that he had actually walked into the back mountain. Looking at the lush woods around him, and remembering Dr's warning, Xiu did not continue to seek death, but slowly retreated, until he breathed a sigh of relief after exiting. Just now he realized that he seemed to have been targeted by something, but he didn't know why it didn't move. It can't be wrong. His intuition is usually very accurate, not to mention that it is related to his own life. However, after being disturbed by this matter, Xiu temporarily let it go. Now he will do his job well and then think about it slowly. Since he has agreed to this job, he must do it well. As for other things, he will talk about it slowly. In fact, he didn't know how to say it, so he could only delay it by doing other things. In the final analysis, it is to avoid reality. When passing by the door of the warehouse, Xiu said to Casey beside him, Casey, come and help with the work. Casey didn't even open his eyes, the leaves around him fluttered, and then he flew over. Soon Xiu pushed the cart out of the warehouse with a bright smile on his face, and shouted, "It's time to eat." As soon as the sentence came out, the elves in the backyard looked at him. After walking around, Xiu called his elves back and cooked a small meal alone. After all, the two of them didn't eat the same level. Xiu sat under the big tree at the door of the warehouse, and several elves were eating beside him. He was a little hungry when he got up in the morning, but now he was in no mood to eat. Seeing them, he didn't know how to start talking.